Kim Jong-un's humiliating secret out after photographer risks his life to leak shocking personal pic. The chubby little gerbil, also known as Kim Jong-un, has been pitching a massive fit over the past week in defiance of President Trump's airstrike on Syria. Threatening full-out nuclear war, deploying his army of 140,000 troops to the border, and showcasing his weaponry has just been part of his antics, as he continues to assert that there will be catastrophic consequences for the United States after we parked our huge-ass aircraft carrier in his backyard. But unfortunately for Kim Jong-un, his mission to prove to the world that he has a set of balls has just backfired in a huge way after what one of his photographers caught on camera. Now little Kim's secret is out, and the full wrath of the chubby dictator has been unleashed upon those he commands. On Monday, the world watched as North Korea showcased their military strength by unveiling their special forces, the Korean People's Army, KPA, for the first time during a military parade, while showing off their new medium to long-range missiles. While the display was meant to strike fear into the hearts of Americans, there was something else the communist dictator unfortunately unveiled after what several American military experts immediately noticed about his military that will no doubt come as a huge embarrassment for the short and round dictator. Conservative Tribune reported. For starters, much of the equipment the highly trained soldiers was toting were outdated designs left over from the Soviet era, such as the dual-lens night vision goggles that destroy depth perception or the North Korean-produced AK-74 knockoff rifles that have terrible ballistics and are inferior to just about anything U.S. troops are using. On top of that, or should I say mounted underneath the rifles, tied on with paracord no less, are special tubular magazines produced by the North Koreans known as helical magazines, according to Ares Armament Research Services, which have been misidentified by many outlets as being grenade launchers. The high-capacity magazines, originally produced solely for Kim's personal contingent of bodyguards, are all but worthless in a real fight as they are extremely difficult to reload, particularly under the stress of combat, and are notorious for jamming repeatedly. The next humiliating detail is the fact that the Special Operations soldiers appear to be equipped with chest-mounted holstered sidearms that appear to be more than 60 years old, most likely CZ-75 semi-automatic pistols produced in then Soviet-dominated Czechoslovakia. Those holstered pistols were attached to tactical vests in a copycat variation of the U.S. Army's light green digital-style camouflage, which don't match the woodland camo-style uniforms the troops were wearing, which also didn't match the apparently hastily spray-painted helmets, nor the hilariously misapplied Party City-style black and green face paint worn by the soldiers. Add in some cheap knockoff Ray-Ban type sunglasses, which will keep little more than sun out of their eyes and will utterly fail under the slightest ballistics test, to complete the would-be special operator look, and, voila! North Korea can proudly claim it is ready to oppose a decapitating strike against their leadership by the real special operators of the U.S. military, which has been steadily training for just such an opportunity and is truly equipped for such a task. All told, for roughly $1,600, pretty much anybody can acquire virtually all of the same or similar equipment worn by these goose-stepping North Korean troops. In fact, it is a fairly safe bet that there are plenty of fat, lazy, out-of-shape American mall ninjas better equipped to actually engage in battle than those who were on display in the North Korean military parade. What's also hilarious to note is that as Kim's high-stepping pansies try to look like badasses to the photographer, oftentimes they could be seen pointing rifles at their heads at the men standing next to them, proving that these aren't quite the highly trained caliber of soldiers that the dictator would have everyone believe. As Kim Jong-un is desperately trying to make his balls appear large on the world stage and intimidate President Trump, he only humiliated himself and his military by trying to pass off his fat, lazy troops as highly trained special ops warriors. I'm pretty sure Amazon and eBay offer more intimidating military uniforms and equipment in their toddler Halloween section than the bozo army of Kim Jong-un. Perhaps this idiot should stop shoving his face full of Twinkies and focus on military tactics if he's going to ever prove to the world that he's a badass. Breaking. Former Obama admin official just stabbed Obama in the back. The sickening truth is out. Two previous Obama assistants neglected to see the bit of broccoli in their leader's teeth. In case you're pondering what that implies, recall your secondary school days when you were preparing to ask somebody out and you'd swing rapidly to your closest companion and ask, as you're demonstrating your toothy smile, "Do I have any broccoli in my teeth?" A decent companion will dependably reveal to your reality, notwithstanding when it's a truth you would prefer not to listen. Barack Obama has gotten his share of brutal truths recently, including a progression of spilled records that basically demonstrate he utilized the IRS to target moderates. Be that as it may, his scandal-free organization is significantly darker than you might suspect, and includes something other than lost cash. For example, did you know Obama staff members controlled online networking so it would have a particular liberal vote? Correct demonstrates you can't think all that you read on Facebook and Twitter. Presently, another chaos, and this one brought about the passings of several regular citizens. At the point when Obama thought of the bonehead plan to permit the Russians to facilitate a synthetic weapons transfer concurrence with the Syrian government, his counsels should have educated him this was a nitwit proposition. Rather, they gestured like a group of bobblehead dolls, permitting him to make a trick of himself and the whole nation. It's reaching a critical stage at this moment. Yes, I'm right. Opinion editor Seth Mandel released this quote is from former Obama State Department official Antony Blinken in Sunday's New York Times. Still, the administration knew all along that it had probably not gotten all of the chemical weapons, and tried to get Russia to help press Syria, without success. Dan Shapiro, who was a member of Obama's National Security Council, had this to say. It is extremely troublesome nowadays to discover great companions' will's identity ruthlessly genuine with you. Obama ought to have invested more energy and circle himself with counsels who recognized what they were doing, as opposed to those that stopped over the wrinkle in the president's slacks. All things considered, there are still a few sidekicks out there who stay faithful to Obama and keep on throwing barriers in Trump's way. These folks certainly need to go. Soon. How about we kick it into high gear in the correct heading once more? What do you think about this? Do not hesitate and write your thoughts in the comments section below. Share the truth, be patriots. Thank you for reading. In Rerouting Nuclear Warship, U.S. looks beyond just North Korea. Possible naval surge in Asian waters would be aimed at keeping China in check. Tokyo, on Saturday, the U.S. Navy announced a surprise realignment of a strike group that includes the USS Carl Vinson nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. The sudden change in plan to move the fleet from the South China Sea to waters near the Korean Peninsula is seen aimed at putting pressure on North Korea, which has been engaging in a series of provocations with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. But Pyongyang's saber-rattling is not the sole purpose of the shift. Just filling in. The U.S. Navy usually has at least one carrier strike group deployed in the Western Pacific. The Carl Vinson, which belongs to the Navy's 3rd Fleet and is normally responsible for the Eastern Pacific, is currently in the South China Sea to fill in for the USS Ronald Reagan, which is undergoing annual inspections and maintenance from January to April. The Ronald Reagan, also a nuclear carrier, belongs to the 7th Fleet, based in Yokosuka, south of Tokyo. A Saturday departure from Singapore would put the Carl Vinson strike group in South Korean waters as early as this weekend. As one expert noted, the deployment will further heighten tensions on the Korean peninsula. But the move does not amount to a surge, since the incoming vessels are merely replacing ones that would normally have already been in the Western Pacific. Doubling up? It will be interesting to see whether the Carl Vinson group remains near the peninsula after the Ronald Reagan is ready to sail, likely in early May. If it does, the Navy would have 2 carriers in the area, meaning it will be safer for naval forces in general to carry out operations. During the Taiwan Strait crisis of 1996, the U.S. Navy deployed 2 carriers to the area to show that it was ready to take military action should Chinese forces decide to take on Taiwan. At the height of the Gulf War, in 1991, the U.S. deployed as many as 5 carrier strike groups in the Persian Gulf, the Eastern Mediterranean and other waters from which to launch attacks on Iraq. Today, The US has an array of bases in East Asia ready to counter North Korea, including Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, a Marine Corps air station in Iwakuni, Yamaguchi Prefecture, Western Japan, and bases in South Korea. It would depend on the size of the operation, but if the US were to attack North Korean nuclear and missile facilities through a limited-scale operation, that is, pinpoint strikes, it would not need a host of carrier groups arrayed along the shore like in the Gulf War. A few groups would probably suffice. U.S. carrier strike groups are typically deployed for slightly longer than 6 months at a time. Given that the Carl Vinson left the U.S. West Coast early this year, it could stay in South Korean waters for another few months before heading back home. Should it linger, there would be 2 carrier groups in the region, and that would certainly be called a surge. Then we would see real tension over the Korean peninsula emerge. Battle scenario. What the US forces are really watching now is probably not the North Korean army but Chinese military's activity, a Japanese security expert said. Should things get ugly on the Korean peninsula, the Chinese army could surge into North Korea via China's northeast and effectively take control of the Raisen region on the Sea of Japan. It could then turn the commercial port of Raisen into a military base for a nuclear submarine capable of firing ballistic missiles. In other words, the US mainland would be within striking distance of Chinese missiles. That would pose an extreme test for the US-Japan security alliance and the reliability of the US nuclear umbrella, on which Japan depends. This building friction over North Korea threatens to not only shake things up on the Korean peninsula but also trigger a long-term change in the military balance of power in Northeast Asia. Breaking, look what just happened at Trump's first White House Easter egg roll. One of the most beloved annual White House events was today, marking the 139th Easter egg roll on South Lawn of the People's House. As one Melania Trump's first big event she expected to host as First Lady, liberal and mainstream considered it to be a litmus test of her hosting chops and didn't want to make it easy for her, which proved to be the case today with what happened. The Easter egg roll is no small undertaking as 21,000 guests were invited and 18,000 eggs were rolled out. All the pomp and American tradition was on full display in a family-friendly atmosphere that arguably beat the last 2 events of this kind under Michelle Obama's organization of it.